Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. U.S. intelligence officials are on alert after new reports suggest ISIS has acquired an arsenal of banned chemical weapons. This comes after the terrorist group is believed to have potentially used those chemical weapons, like mustard gas, on the Kurdish forces in Syria and Iraq. Here with reaction is Peter Brookes from the Heritage Foundation and Rebeccah Heinrichs with the Hudson Institute. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebeccah, let me ask you first, first of all, we had initially assumed that these chemical weapons may have been stolen from the Assad arsenal, but now it seems that they're homegrown, homemade. Has ISIS now embarked on a policy to make chemical weapons?
It's hard to tell, but they don't really have any moral boundaries about what kinds of weapons they might use or what sorts of tactics they might use to terrorize the people in the region. And so it definitely should not come as a surprise to us that they might use these weapons. The question is now, how are they getting their hands on them? Are they simply just producing them themselves, or are they getting them from the Assad regime, which has supposedly gotten rid of all of their chemical weapons from the deal that the United States worked out with Russia back in 2013? Or are they leftover weapons from Iraq, from the initial U.S. invasion? So that is yet to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Peter, how hard is it to make chemical weapons?
Depends what sort of chemical weapons you're trying to make. I mean, the ones that they're talking about here, mustard, chlorine, things along that line, it's not that difficult. Some of them come from, like chlorine gas comes from basic chemical processes. I mean, this is something that can be quite available by using basic engineering and techniques. So the challenge with those of them, of course, is not only producing them, but also deploying them. They usually need to be deployed in high levels of persistence or high concentrations to be effective. They're also affected by the winds. If there's winds, they will be dispersed. But they're obviously, as we know from like World War I, they're obviously very, very ugly weapons, and they're terror weapons. Even if they're not that effective, they're very terrifying to an opponent, or certainly to a civilian, to the civilians. But also, their opponents may not be capable of operating in a chemical weapons environment. U.S. forces, other Western forces, NATO forces practice this, think about it, are ready for it. But if you're talking about the Peshmerga, the Kurdish Peshmerga, or the Iraqi forces, they may not be able to operate in a chemical weapons environment, which would certainly be an advantage to the Islamic State.
Rebeccah, you said something that struck me. You said ISIS would have no compunction, no hesitation in using these weapons. So far, it seems that they've used them against military targets, but would they be willing to use them against civilian populations?
Well, the Assad regime certainly has been, and the Assad regime is definitely a terrorist regime, but ISIS, I mean, we've seen ISIS use some of the most brutal and terrifying tactics, beheadings, for instance. So it does not seem that ISIS would have any problem doing that. Mm-hmm. What's interesting too is, remember, it's the German Defense Ministry that first raised these reports of possible use against the Kurds, and the Germans are there to help train the Kurds that are there. And remember, General Odierno just recently said a couple days ago that much of the gains, much of the success against ISIS has really been to the credit of the Kurds. I mean, the Kurds have been doing such wonderful work and are really a great people and putting up a great valiant effort to push back and beat back ISIS. So yes, it would be a very terrifying and terrible thing if they're now being subjected to the use of chemical weapons.
Peter, do you think ISIS has a plan that they're trying to create or either acquire or build or develop chemical and biological weapons?
I would think that if these are actually indigenous to the Islamic State and not part of Assad's regime's arsenal or something else, as you mentioned earlier on, I think we can expect that. I wouldn't be surprised if they were used against civilians. I would hate to see that sort of thing happen, but look at the barbarity we've seen so far from the Islamic State. So I wouldn't put it beyond them. They want people to subjugate. They're trying to create a state. They're trying to create a caliphate, and they might use these against civilians as well. But yeah, this is something to worry about. Now, these chemical weapons we've seen so far are not nerve gases, such as VX or sarin, which are much more lethal. So that could be the next step, the next direction for them. But I think it shows, KT, that they're willing to use weapons of mass destruction. These are chemical weapons. They're considered weapons of mass destruction. And I think this is something, the teaching point here is we should be thinking about other regimes that might become vulnerable to groups like the Islamic State, especially if they have nuclear weapons. So I think that if they get their hands on weapons of mass destruction of a greater extent, beyond like such as nerve gas or, God forbid, nuclear weapons somewhere down the road, something we should be very, very concerned about.
You know, I think Peter brings up a really good point to finish on, which is we are now seeing the introduction of nuclear weapons into the region. Where does this stop? It probably doesn't stop with just chemical weapons or mustard gas. Well, thank you both for joining us, Peter Brookes and Rebeccah Heinrichs.
Thank you.
Check out FoxNews.com for more on the fight against ISIS. And I'm KT McFarland. Thanks for watching DEF CON 3.